To begin with, thank you very much for inviting me to your show. And today, as you know, the entire nation is coming out to show solidarity with the people of Jammu and Kashmir, particularly those who are residing in illegally Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir and have been suffering for over 7 decades now under Indian repression and absolutely horrendous human rights violations. It sometimes, even it pains you to even talk about the misery that that people of Kashmir have suffered, but they're very resilient. So to begin with, salute to the generations now of Kashmiri mothers and fathers and the young people who have given unlimited sacrifices and continue to do so, particularly since the last 11 years of the fascist Modi government. Now, coming to your question, why is the international community silent? I think the winds are changing now. In 2019, when 05 August happened, and India unilaterally decided to go against its own constitution, because it is the Constitution of India that guarantees a special status to the Indian occupied Kashmir. And it is not only going against their own constitution, but also against all international laws, and particularly the very sacred resolutions of the UN Security Council, which call for a peaceful resolution of the dispute in line with the international law, in line with the UN resolutions, and in line with the will and desire of the people of Kashmir. But as we are all aware, this is an issue which has been left over. It's an unfinished business of partition. And 7 decades have passed. And over the years, a lot of things have changed, particularly in the region. And in 2019, when Modi was bold enough to take such a absolutely illegal action of abrogating the special status of Jammu and Kashmir, it did so because it was riding high on the approval of international community. International community, particularly led by the United States and the West, were trying to prep up India as the net security provider in this region. And that was naturally not against us, not against anybody, but basically against the Chinese competition and the peaceful rise of China. So they were so sort of threatened by this peaceful rise of China that they absolutely thought it was an existential importance for them to build up India here. That is why in 2008, while they were sanctioning us and putting sanctions on our missile programs, they were signing nuclear deals with the Indians and going again against international law and against the NSG procedures. And they have not signed the NTP. And it's still, they went and they gave them all the support. And since then, they have armed India to the teeth. And it must also be said that economically, India was showing promise. And we naturally have gone through our own cycle of difficulties in the last 40 years that made India the darling of the West. And they were, as I said, they were so sort of taken by the promise of India as a market, as an economy, as the emerging leader of what India would like to be, the global South, and another pillar of emerging power, that they gave Modi, basically they forgave Modi murder. And Modi was a darling of the Indians. So while um, they were shouting about human rights violations and imposing FATF regulations on us and sanctions on us, they accepted everything that India did because it very nicely fit into their strategic and security calculus. So that is why they were able to get away with it. But we must now remember that times have changed. And times have changed in a big way. And as the wisdom of our, ancient philosopher says, you need to feel the direction of the wind. You cannot sail, against the direction of the wind. And right now, India has made so many mistakes that the wind is not in India's favor. So the wind is actually getting out of the sails of India, and India itself is to be blamed for it. With Modi's horrendous human rights violations and its persecution of the minorities, in which the Kashmiris, of course, are at the forefront, but the other Muslim minorities and even the Christian and Buddhist minorities, and even its own low caste Hindus, the way that they have treated them, that it is now becoming impossible for the West, particularly. It's easy for the Americans to accept these because they are not that big in human rights issues. It is the Europeans that are finding it very difficult to digest this human rights violations in India, and particularly this new India that thinks it has become so great and that it has become a big boy in the big boys club, that it dared to, carry out terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism acts in Canada, in US, in UK, and even in Australia. So now the West has for itself tasted what India is and what a two-faced monster Mr. Modi is. And it is the Indian psychology also. They have always played double game. And now we saw that they played a double game in Ukraine, both with the Americans and the Russians, who were their strategic partners. They kept telling the Russians that, we are only getting into court because of economic cooperation. But then it became a security partner. And now they are feeling the heat from the Americans also, because the US under President Trump has fully realized that India bluffed. And that is why he said that the Indian economy and the Russian economy are dead economies. And they can go and trade among themselves, but they're really not getting anywhere. So I think all these factors have now come at a point where the wind is in favor of Pakistan. And I feel the wind is also, and the times are very conducive for the people of Kashmir also to once again raise their voice in as strongly as they can. We can only let them diplomatic and moral support. Naturally, it is their fight. And they have, it is sort of even difficult to ask them to give more sacrifices. But I think now is the time when all the elements are coming together, and maybe their prayers may be answered, because I have not remembered in my 65 years ever seen India so isolated, so nervous about where its foreign policy is going. Today, all of South Asia all of South America, Africa, and their own partners and their strategic partner, Russia, they are all not in favor of India. So I think now is the time that the international community, particularly the United Nations, must play a very strong role. And they must, of course, take on Mr. President Trump's offer of mediation and of resolving the outstanding Kashmir issue. So I really very strongly feel that Pakistan has proven its strength, both diplomatic, political, and militarily after the 4-day conflict that we saw in June. And it is a rebirth of a nation as far as Pakistan is concerned. And its voice is being heard. So we should, as a nation, we have always stood by Kashmir, but we need to stand even more strongly with Kashmir in all the diplomatic channels, in all the diplomatic fora, and also talk to all the other Muslim countries, get to invigorate the Muslim Ummah once again. Saudi Arabia has played a very, very, it's emerging as an important Muslim country whose sort of diplomatic initiatives are not only bearing fruit, but they are being heard. So maybe countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like Pakistan, the countries of Maghreb can all come together and build that pressure on the international community to now heed the cries of the half widows, of the hundreds of, tens of thousands of children and youth who are missing, and put an end to these using of pallets and blinding a whole generation of the poor Kashmiris. And people are now, as you've seen how people are rising for Gaza. I think a very strong movement, a very strong digital movement. Gaza, I've done so many postings in Europe, and I've followed the Palestine issue. They have really used the social media, and their narrative has been able to make find a place in the hearts of the people. We need to lead that narrative for our Kashmiri brethren, so they can also finally have what they desire, and what is the international law and the UN Security Council resolution, a plebiscite. And that can only be held. That can only and only be held if Modi reverts the actions of 5th August, because without that, no negotiations can go on. It is absolutely not possible. Those over there were 800,000 soldiers. Now I believe there are even more. They must be removed from Kashmir. These, nationalizing the Kashmiris has to stop, and they have to put an end to changing the demographics of Kashmir, which means that non-Kashmiris, they have to stop giving residence permissions to non-Kashmiris and allow international humanitarian organizations, international diplomats, international forums like the OIC, like the UN, to go into Kashmir, the Indian occupied Kashmir. On our side, everybody can go. They can visit the border every time they want, We allow generalists, we allow everybody, but they don't allow anybody. So unless these actions are taken, I think no forward movement can take place, because we have already said that we will not talk to India unless the core issue of Kashmir is the centerpiece of those dialogue or that negotiation. And I think the time could not be more conducive. And the international wind, I think, is the stars are favoring the Kashmiris at this time. And I think we must stand very firmly behind. We have been raising this since 2019, since 5th August, and Pakistan has left no stone unturned. We have gone and knocked at the door of every international organization, and not only since 19th August, as far as the human rights violations are concerned, the Kashmiri diaspora itself has gone and knocked at every door. And I was ambassador to the EU for over 5.5 years. And I remember how difficult it was to make the Europeans understand. They understand. I'm not saying that they don't understand, but to make them speak up for the Kashmiris because of the reasons that I've explained before. The shining India was blinding them, and their necessity to find a counterbalance to China was blinding them to the cries of for help of the Kashmiris. And I remember it was with the effort of the expatriate Kashmiris from all over the world, and a lot of effort by Pakistan, including the Pakistani politicians, the government, and everybody else concerned, and the diplomats, that after 21 years, we were able to bring the issue in 2017 for discussion at the Human Rights Commission, Human Rights Committee of the Parliament, European Parliament. So it is tough. But now, as I said, is the time. They have the expatriate Kashmiri community has done a lot of work. We have a lot of evidence. Our dossiers are absolutely clear and very, very strong condemnation of what India is trying to do. And this is the time to expose India because it is absolutely against international law. To change the demographics, it is like ethnic cleansing, you know. But this is, they're already doing ethnic cleansing by, killing them and false encounters and all else that we have talked about. But this is a very legal way in which they are trying to de-Kashmirize the Kashmiris. Every last grain of sand of Kashmir is for the Kashmiris. And India agreed to this at the United Nations. So, as I said, it is in violation of its own promises to the international community, and the International Human Rights Commission has to take action. They must heed the pleas of the Kashmiri people, and we should fully support them. If they cannot be present in those forums, we are present in that forum. And we have, against all odds, always put up a very, very strong fight for the Kashmiris. But I feel that this illegal act of, basically they are disinheriting the Kashmiris of their own land. This is exactly what they're trying to do in Gaza also. So if the entire world, the entire now the entire Muslim world is also behind Gaza and the whole international community, we need to mobilize them in the same way, in the same passion for Kashmir also. And now is the time, because I think India is at its weakest at the moment. It's a very interesting question you have asked. And I will answer this by narrating that incident when Pakistan and India came into being. Of course, Qaid-e-Azam was the Governor General, but there they had made Mountbatten the Governor General. And very, in the ensuing 1 or 2 months after partition, there were huge disturbances in, I forget where, but in India. And Nehru asked Mountbatten to call the various sections. And he said, but you're independent now. You handle it. But that colonial mindset did not allow him, because then also Nehru said that they will listen to you more than they will listen to me. And I think both Israel and India have taken the rule book, the old archaic rule book from the British. This is exactly how British. Absolute torture, absolute punishments, and divide and rule, and using very, very rigorous rules and regulations to dehumanize people, to denationalize them, to sort of de-inherit them from their jobs, from their houses, from their territories. Look what Netanyahu is doing in Palestine. This is exactly what he is doing. And it is very interesting to see that in the Pakistan and India conflict, nobody in the world brought the Indian narrative. The only person, the only country in the world that stood and spoke out in favor of India was Israel. So when, there was a lot of controversy about it, but I think when Bilawal Bhutto-Zardari, when he was gone abroad with the delegation, so when he said it's a cheap, is a small copy of Netanyahu, he is the Timo version of Netanyahu, that is 100% correct. And how can people forget that this Modi was banned from entering US? He was banned from entering EU because he was the butcher of Gujarat, where he murdered and, thousands of Muslims. And it was a massacre. And he's been doing the same since the last 11 years. And so I think that people are seeing through. And India has been now completely exposed. And both in terms of its shining India economy or shining India IT, or, it has completely lost its stature as the net security provider of this region. And the region has completely and absolutely rejected that, that paradigm. So now, I think it is time for the human rights activists, for the Kashmiri diaspora, to take this issue of Modi trying to forcibly cleanse Kashmir of the Kashmiris to every doorstep internationally.